Well, fortunately, they got cell phone working last night, and we were able to call Steve to the great beyond. He went over there just to see what the weather was like this weekend, kind of like old people do in Florida, you know.
I was gonna say, wait a minute, did I die or something over the last 24 hours that I'm not
No,
aware of? Because you're not getting my
no,
shit
you
if I
just wanted
die.
to,
You know that, right? Okay.
no. If they're able to make it to where people can call the other side whenever they want to, they should. Obviously, you can just go over there whenever they want to. They have, I believe, it's called Soul Door now. You know, you just or Soul Vacation.
There you go.
Just go over there whenever.
Just
And you know,
and
it's funny. One of them, you know, he was saying something about being like outside space time and all this other stuff. And somebody in the live chat, I didn't remember who it was, and I wish I had noted it. But they said, "Well, wait a minute. Does that mean you can call yourself after, call yourself after you're dead? So I can call my future self when he's dead? And how does that work?"
That just goes into a completely different other rabbit hole.
That'd be so cool. I don't know how that would work. You know,
it was enough dealing with what we were dealing with last night to pile on any more. I think would just be egregious. But welcome everyone. You have arrived at NonSequitur. If you don't know why you're here, we don't either. Because actually we do tonight. Tonight we do because it's not a dumpster fire. We actually have somebody smart and with a really cool topic tonight. There's no dumpster fires tonight. But Nikolas Brand, welcome, sir. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great, Kyle. How about you?
I'm excellent. I'm fantastic and fabulous.
Awesome.
Speaking of fabulous,
always.
Speaking of fabulous, though, I got dragged into this Rappaport thing today, and boy, has he made a bitch mad. He is going to on Sunday. The man, for those of you who don't know, Steve's been embroiled in a Twitter fight for days now, and my notifications blow up. Well, it just goes crazy, and so this morning I get a message from Steve with a link to a video. The link to the video says "Witnessing to LGBTQM," and I'm like, "What's the M stand for?" Well, the M stands for MAPS, which is a word that means minor attracted people. In other words, pedophiles. And so, don't you know that all day long, I have been Twitter fucking the shit out of him all day long, and on Sunday, that bitch is mine. Well, after Steve's, that bitch is
yeah.
mine.
Well, he gets sloppy seconds. Whatever's left over, he can have, kind of thing. We're gonna burn him to the ground. I'm not even fronting. If you guys want to see the greatest evisceration of somebody in the history of eviscerations, watch this Sunday, because I'm going to demonstrate without any question whatsoever that this guy's lied so many times, and then he'll take over and go the whole narrative that he's relating pedophilia to the LGBTQ crowd and stuff like that. It's going to be glorious. He's going to go down. Even his own people are starting to get involved. So watch this Sunday, because I'm taking the motherfucker down.
Yeah. So I got a message in the live chat that there's a little bit of feedback. Does anybody else hear that? I don't hear
I can't know if that means
okay. All right. Cool. Okay. So tonight for the smoking nun. Right before we jump into tonight's topic, I caught it's a fairly old story, not too old. I think it's about a year or two old, but I did a couple of videos last week that spoke about the need for everybody to be skeptical and why faith. When people say that, don't worry about them, they're having faith is harmless. It can't really hurt you. Why that's not true. And I thought this case really kind of exposed that point. So let's begin. Dave, if you'll throw up that first slide. Steve, when you see this image, what comes to mind?
A priest questioning if the baby's his or not.
God, Dave, did you tell him what tonight's story was on?
No, he hasn't shown me anything. Why?
That's dead on. No, that's not it at all.
Okay, I was gonna say that's pretty good. I was like, yes.
obesity is a problem that many people struggle with. I struggled with it. I still struggle with it today. I used to be close to 300 pounds. I was like 296 at my heaviest, and I know what that's like. And in order to lose that, you have to actually, number one, get in the mind frame that you want to do that, and actually go out and attempt to do the work. But tonight's story begins with a gentleman that had an injury, and he got kind of overweight. But instead of going out and fixing that, he let himself get to 800 pounds, waiting on God to fix it for him. He said that his faith and his health and his weight would come off because he was an associate pastor of a church, and if he held out long enough, that God would fix that for him. What wound up happening to the guy is him getting fused with his recliner, his chair, because of the sores and everything that had come on. They had to cut a hole in the wall of his mobile home and cut him out of the chair, and then 2 hours later he passed away after being removed from that chair. So Dave, go ahead and show this video.
In March, 33-year-old Daniel Webb, then 550 pounds, came home from the hospital after he hurt his knee and sat down in his recliner. And that's where he stayed for the next 8 months, wearing nothing but a blanket and, according to police, ballooning to 800 pounds. His wife says the former preacher was determined that faith would heal his leg.
The man totally believed in God and in his healing. He read his Bible daily. He has spent his full focus on God, and he was literally waiting and praying. He wanted so much to get up, and, he wanted to tell everybody what Jesus done.
Daniel Webb slept and used the bathroom in his chair.
So that we don't get hit from AP. But yes, so what I wanted to for the first 5 minutes or so of the show, talk about that. And Steve, Nick, what are your thoughts on hearing that? The faith that you don't have to do anything, that a divine intervention will fix your ailments.
Go ahead, Nick.
I mean, I think we pretty much just showed that's not the case. I think, even if you're a person of faith, I think a lot of the faiths kind of push towards you really do something you do have to do for yourself. And sometimes you won't get that divine help unless you can start doing for yourself and show that you really do want it. Because it's really that's sad that something like that happened, and that was that was what was put forth by that wasn't addressed for so long.
Yeah,
the guy was 33.
That's young. The rule of thumb is, God's supposed to help those who help themselves, right? I'm struggling to take 5 extra pounds off that I'm going for. People know that this month I've literally every day this month I've been walking 1 mile at 6 o'clock in the morning. Yesterday I happened to walk 2 miles because I actually walked 1 mile and was like, that wasn't even enough. I want to get back out, and I walked another mile. And I'm watching my calories. So to 5 pounds overweight, is enough. It's rough, right? I couldn't imagine being 500, 600, 700, 800 pounds. That's beyond morbidly obese, right? I mean, the point where he's fused with his chair, and the fact that he's thinking that God's going to resolve this for him for some reason. He needed, and I'm not saying belief in God is a mental disorder. That's not what I'm saying. He obviously needed some kind of mental health. He needed some kind of counseling. He needed attention, and he didn't get it, obviously.
Well, it's not that I don't know that he needed mental health, because I think sometimes that if you have a strong conviction or a strong faith, it can lead to the delusion that something like that could happen. That if you just I mean, I remember being there.
But in reality, it's not. We all know it's not.
Of course not. Of course not. In my story, I remember many nights laying there like, take the gay away. I don't want to be gay anymore. That
what
the desire to want to doesn't really amount to like an actual outcome.
Sure.
Right. And what got me about him was because his wife, instead of being contrite for letting him go that bad, like instead of saying, hey, get up off your ass and get your knee moving and don't stick to that chair, you need to move. Because that's what a doctor was telling him. I guarantee you that's what a good doctor was going to say to him. So,
Yep.
You need to keep moving it because the minute, and instead of that, she said she wishes that God would have taken her with him.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Later on in the video, they asked, "Do you have any regrets of not pushing it a little bit more?" And she says, "No, I don't have any regrets." You know, he went to be with. It's just a dangerous thing, I think, and it's a sad, especially somebody that's 33 years old has their life. You know, I'm almost 33. Don't tell anyone, and let's not have any more discussion about that aspect. But I can't imagine, you know, it being over at this age. There's way too much life left to live. So it's fine if you have faith and you're not harming others. That's where I think faith is fine. But faith's not enough to have. You can't just have faith. That leads to situations like this. If you want to have faith, then that's your choice. But you just can't only have faith because it never ends well. Okay, so let's go into a not a controversial issue at all, I don't think. I'm kidding. Probably this divides several of the paleontology community, I'm sure. But tonight we have Nikolas Brand, who has he's studying for his master's in paleontology at East Tennessee State University, and he's here to talk with us about a radical and interesting and equally terrifying theory about our childhood beloved animals. And Nick, we'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself and then tell us what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Alrighty. So, hi everybody. Like Kyle said, I'm from East Tennessee State University. I'm studying for my master's there. I'll be working on some Pleistocene material, so really recent stuff working on. And the fact she worked on dinosaur material, which is kind of what I'll be talking about tonight. So basically, you know, there's a lot of discussion you see around on the internet, and especially related to Jurassic Park movies, where people get up in arms about whether or not the dinosaurs and the raptors in particular. And so just having been exposed to the paleontological community for so long and having actually dealt with it as a professional for a while, I just thought it'd come on here and kind of let everyone know where we are with like what dinosaurs feathered, if any, are. I'm not going to spoil anything yet. And yeah, so just kind of give you an idea of what might have been feathered, what might not have, what we know, and that kind of thing.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we'll move you over here in between Steve and I, and let you take us through it. See if they did or not.
Cool. So probably go ahead and jump to the next slide since I just gave the intro. And so basically, like, this is kind of a semi-controversial topic. There's been a fair bit of research done into it, not a whole lot. You find sporadic papers every few years where usually the major theropod, the meat-eating dinosaur guys, will go back and forth on what their ideas are. And for the longest time, we didn't have much evidence of feathers. But the way I'd like to just kind of get going, I like to define terms. And so just to get everybody on the same page, I'm going to go into a little bit about like what a dinosaur is and then show you some of the common groups so you know what we're talking about. And so this is just a generalized early dinosaur right here. And they've got really like there's 4 like major characteristics that I'd consider important for people to know. Like, this is what separates a dinosaur. It's its own kind of creature. It's not just a big reptile, as you'll hear some young earth creationists throw out there. So the first obvious thing is that they have their legs upright, kind of like we. They don't sprawl like a lizard. They're very pillar and erect. And they also have a very specific way to achieve that their legs actually fit in, their femur, how it fits into the hip bone. There's actually a hole there. It's not like where we have a ball and socket joint where the socket kind of cups the part that rotates. They just have a hole and it goes through it and sits right into the hip. And then their ankle is very specialized in one direction hinge, so it's up or down, and that's the only movement you get. And crocodiles actually have a modified form of that where it's more of a diagonal. And the last thing, if you've seen the dinosaur skulls, especially like Tyrannosaurus, there's a bunch of holes in the skull, and actually usually it's the second hole back. It's in between the and the nostrils. They have what's called an estuary. It's basically just a large hole in the skull. And so that those are some of the features that all dinosaurs have, and that's how we know that they're kind of their own distinct group. Next slide, please. And so just real quick, I'm not going to sit on this slide very long, but I just wanted to kind of give everybody an idea of this is the dinosaur family tree. Try to keep this in mind when I'm going through some of this stuff and talking about the different dinosaurs. And there's the two main groups have the split is Ornithischia and Saurischia. And so we've got Ornithischia on the top, and that is bird-hipped. And then we have Saurischia on the bottom, which is lizard-hipped. And we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. So just so once again, kind of give you an idea of what the different groups are. These are the sauropods. So this is just some of the diversity of them. And all the dinosaurs probably came from a small form that looked similar to this guy on the left. This is a prosauropod. And so even though the sauropods end up being the biggest, most massive dinosaurs, they actually started out small, but then got big really, really quickly. And so, you know, they have brachiosaurs, which are famous for being the first dinosaur you actually see in Jurassic Park, all the way to Brontosaurus, which there was a controversy with that a few years back where they said that the name wasn't valid. And for those of you who Brontosaurus was your favorite dinosaur, I'm happy to tell you the name got resurrected and Brontosaurus is indeed a thing now. So if that was your favorite dinosaur, you're in luck. It still can be. Next slide, please.
I didn't know it was ever not a thing.
Yeah. There was actually there was a short period I think they synonymized it with Apatosaurus, and so they said that the correct name it's just an Apatosaurus. And since they named Apatosaurus first, the way that nomenclature works, it was the same thing. It was just Apatosaurus, but a new paper actually separated it back out and found that Apatosaurus was indeed distinct from Apatosaurus. And then you have the paleo drama gets very, very real sometimes. That was another thing people were up in arms about. And so moving on to the other, this is the Ornithischia. And there's a very, very large diversity here. It's not nice and simple with the sauropods where you just had 4 legs and a long tail. Here you have your ceratopsians with all the horns. You have your duckbills, your hadrosaurs, and they have a crazy assortment of nests like the Parasaurolophus here in the top left. If you guys have seen the Disney movie called Dinosaur, the main character Aladar, that was this dinosaur on the top right, Iguanodon. And then the Stegosaurus and the armored dinosaurs like Ankylosaurs also fall into this group. So it's a very large, diverse Ornithischia. Next slide, please. And then we get to what people's favorites are, the cephalopods. And these are what people tend to think of when they think of dinosaurs. These are the 2-legged, ferocious, meat-eating dinosaurs. And all of them were bipedal. Spinosaurus is probably bipedal. I'm gonna get into that. That's another controversial topic. But you know, we have tyrannosaurs, raptors, just for the most part, a bunch of ferocious meat eaters. Next slide. But you all have a few plant eaters as well. So some of these animals actually evolved secondarily to become herbivores again. And so these 3 dinosaurs along the top, one is a Therizinosaurus, and it's got really big, almost tyrannosaur size. They had these wicked claws on their arms that could get up. The claws themselves could be like almost a meter long. So they were really, really large herbivorous creatures. And then you also had the Ornithomimus, or a lot of the time you hear those called the ostrich dinosaur. And they're similar to what stampeded in the Jurassic Park movies. And you can get even more bird-like looking, like the oviraptors here, and they just straight up have beaks and weird crests on their heads. And then, of course, birds are just theropod dinosaurs. They are theropods. And so we have a great diversity of birds today. They're the only surviving. So technically, dinosaurs aren't extinct. It's just that all the non-avian dinosaurs went extinct when the meteor hit. So that kind of give you, next slide, please. That should give you an idea of the kind of diversity that we're dealing with when we're talking about dinosaurs, all these different forms. And if I bring this up and show you this again, you may have noticed that the theropods are in the bottom there, and they're the Saurischia group, the lizard-hipped. And that sounds kind of weird that birds are lizard-hipped and not bird-hipped. And what that is, to kind of clear up that distinction, is that hip shape that you see in birds actually probably evolved twice. is the leading hypothesis right now, and that Ornithischia developed it, and birds developed it separately. And that the lizard's hip is probably basal to the group. And really, that's just, I want you to try to keep this in mind as we go forward and kind of think about how these groups are related. And from here, I'm going to take you through some of the different dinosaurs and talk a little bit about what a feather actually is. Next slide. And so, yeah, so, you know, we know birds are feathered. And the question is, what dinosaurs feathered? Are any of them feathered? And this is, if you go on internet forums, this is really, really important. The most important thing in the world, if you guys didn't know, is whether or not the Jurassic Park raptors are feathered. And this will just bring the internet to its knees in an all-out battle in the YouTube comment sections. And but beyond that, jokes aside, it is a very, very interesting question, because it would be really neat for science to figure out, you know, where these feathers came from, which animals probably are feathered, because that can tell us a lot about what might be possible and tell us about the story of evolution. Next slide, please. And so this is a generalized drawing of what a modern feather looks like. So this is a pennaceous feather, or what's generally called like a flight feather. And what they are is they're a keratinous structure. So they're made of keratin. And this is actually the same thing that your fingernails and your hair are made out of. And then a lot of animals' claws and horns and hooves are made out of this as well. But there's a distinction to be made. Feathers are made out of something called beta keratin, whereas fingernails and hair are alpha keratin. And beta keratin, it's just a different type of protein, and it's found only in birds' feathers and reptile scales. And those are the only two places. So that's just another line of evidence showing how closely related birds are to reptiles and dinosaurs. And the general structure of the feathers that we tend to have today is you have a central shaft with barbs coming off, and each of those barbs has little barbules that come off of it. And but you'll kind of see through this that there are other types of feathers. This is just the most common one that people think of when you think of a bird or a feather. Next slide, please. And so this is Archaeopteryx. This is kind of the granddaddy of the transitional fossils, and one of the first, if not the first, actual feathered fossil found. And Archaeopteryx is particularly interesting because it's about as smack dab in the middle of being a dinosaur or a bird that you can possibly be. And so like a dinosaur, it has teeth, it's got claws on its hands, it's got essentially claws on its feet, and it has a long bony tail. But then if you look at this fossil, you see it's got essentially its wings with really, really long feathers that cover the wings and the tail, just like a bird. And that was, you know, this is still a debate today as to how they actually should classify it. Is it closer to birds or is it closer to dinosaurs? And the thing about this specimen, this is a specimen, and the thing to keep in mind about all of these fossils that I'm going to show you with feathers is this is a rare thing to find. So fossilization in itself is a very, very rare process. You need a lot of things to go right for there to be a fossil, because most animals, what happens when they die is the bones get left out on the surface and either something eats them or they just get scattered and eroded away. You need an animal to die and then get covered with sediment really, really quickly. And the need to happen for stuff like feathers to be preserved, because they're not as strong as bone, they don't hold up as well. You need a finer sediment or something little more definition to actually show. And so this is found in what's called a Lagerstätten, which is basically a really, really, really rich or a really, really nice preservation site. And that's going to be crucial. We haven't found these for much of our human history. We find more every year, but they are rare sites. And so these are, whenever we can find fossils that are feathered, that's very, very, it's a comparatively rare event, and you need a lot of conditions to go right. Next slide, please.
Mm-hmm. I can never say that, Archaeopteryx. Yeah. I had to practice it for like days.
You got it. Well, there's one of these in here in a little bit. That's just I'll try to say it, but I make no promises. This one, so this is a dinosaur called Caudipteryx, and it's a small theropod dinosaur again. And so as I go through these first few, we're kind of going farther from birds and closer and further into like the base of dinosaurs. And so this is a small theropod, and right away you'll notice it doesn't appear to have been a flyer. It's not like Archaeopteryx, where it's got the great big wings that are very, very readily apparent. It did, however, have a coat of almost down, almost like kind of filamentous feathers that are a little simpler than what you see, probably very similar to what you see in baby birds. And there's a few dinosaurs with this, but the problem with actually analyzing them is they tend to be so closely together that actually getting them under a microscope to observe the structure is very, very hard, because they'll stick there, and then it's really, really hard before fossilization to actually tell what's going on with them. But you can see them, and so along its back you've got that darker colored ridge, and that's probably what that is, or those downy feathers, and some specimens have them better than others. But the important thing for Caudipteryx here is if you look on the tail, you see this fan, a fan-shaped structure, and that's going to tell you kind of about what the animal was doing. So it's got feathers that look like those flight feathers, but it's clearly not to fly with those just on its tail. And so that's telling you this is probably some sort of display structure or some sort of communication function that this is serving. And you know, you can tell this kind of evidence too from feather. They're not just going to tell you if an animal was flying or not. Next slide.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we have what I think is one of the coolest and one of the most important fossils that have been found in more recent times. This is called Sinosauropteryx. And this has what's called a filamentous feather covering over most of it. And the filaments is a simple, almost like, looks kind of like a hair. And it's basically just covered in those, but they're actually, they're homologous with feathers. So they're not actually hair. This isn't a mammal, but it's just a very similar looking structure. And the thing that you'll immediately notice if you look at this fossil is you've got this dark streak going down the back and then over parts of the tail in the body. And this is that's actually really, really important, because they continued to do work on this and found out that that's actually pigments that are preserved. And so what they found is those pigments are coming from preserved melanosomes. And you actually are, for the first time ever, you always hear, we can't tell what a dinosaur looked like. We'll never know what color they were. But this reconstruction below the fossil, that's almost certainly what the animal probably looked like. If those are indeed melanosomes, and from what I understand, most everyone accepts that that's what they are now, you can go and look at what type of melanosome they are, and actually compare it to modern birds and tell what kind of colors the animal actually had in life, if you can get those things preserved. And so this is another case of just absolutely exceptional preservation. And so the features that we're relatively sure of is this color, the ringed tail, and even a bandit mask across the eyes that this animal had. And so this is called, with a darker color on top and a lighter color on the bottom, this is counter shading, and you see this in a lot of animals today. And so that can even tell you kind of about the environment. Oh, you go.
It looks kind of like a raccoon dinosaur.
Yeah, no, it does. That's actually kind of what I was thinking. I almost wonder if it was maybe just like kind of a generalist like that. And if you guys like have questions or comments, please jump in. Don't just let me ramble. Because that's what I'm here for, is just kind of let people know about what's going on and share some cool stuff about some dinosaurs and some feathers. Next slide, please. And then we get to probably one of my favorite dinosaurs. This is Microraptor. And you'll notice immediately, compared to Sinosauropteryx, this looks a lot more like a flying creature. And we're back to those kind of those more the modern flight-looking feathers, the pennaceous feathers. And we actually have a ton of specimens of these. So these are really, really well described now. And you'll notice, unlike birds, they've actually got these, it's almost secondary wings that they've done with their legs. They've got those large feathers going all the way down their legs. And I like this fossil because it shows that very, very clearly. And so this is an animal that was almost climbing in the trees. And we're almost certain that they could glide. And I've actually heard some talk. I don't think anything's been published on it, but at some of the conferences, people have given talks. And biomechanics might actually support this animal powered flight. and that would actually predate any. I believe it predates modern birds as a group, and so you have this even just within a small. We're still very, very closely related to birds. We haven't left Dromaeosauridae yet, which is the group that has all the raptors. And you have this large diversity of different types of feathers and different things that the animals appear to be doing with their feathers, just super, super closely related to birds. Next slide, please. And a lot of these fossils, that one too, a lot of this stuff is coming from China right now because they have really, really nice, they've got almost a perfect storm. They've got all these volcanic deposits where volcanic ash has covered things. And it's just a very large area, and it covers the late Jurassic and early Cretaceous, I believe. And some of these feather fossils that we're finding are coming from there. And because they weren't looked at in the past, we're having almost just this upwelling of a ton of just feathered fossils. There was actually recently a dinosaur tail they found, a piece of a dinosaur tail that was completely covered in feathers that they found encased in amber. And so just stuff like this is becoming more.
These are coming from China, you said?
Yeah, most of the things. The Microraptor came from China, and I believe the Caudipteryx did. And then a couple of the other ones that I show in a little bit.
So they're communist dinosaurs then. We can't have that.
Yes, they must be eradicated. That's why we don't put them in museums anymore, Kyle. Come on. And I always appreciate a good bash. So, and then we get to the dinosaur that a lot of people are very, very familiar with, Velociraptor. And now we have Chris Pratt here in the middle, fending off two Velociraptors. The one on the left is what you see in the Jurassic Park movies, and this is what most people tend to think of when they hear the word Velociraptor. In reality, that's not even close. This little green dude on the bottom right, that's how big a Velociraptor actually is. And that's a big one. They're actually really, really small animals. Kyle, you look perplexed.
Well, I didn't know that they were that small because, know, I guess when we're growing up, when you're young, you get, like you said, most people my age got probably what they think of dinosaurs from Jurassic Park, because I used to collect all of the, the little action figure things, and raptors were about the size of a person, not like a little turkey. It looks like a little turkey with a long tail.
Yeah, it does. And there are raptors that are this big. There are ones that are bigger. So this is about the size of probably a really, really large Deinonychus, or Deinonychus. And there's a couple other big ones. There's a Utah raptor, which is a fair bit bigger than a person, and then another one that's been found that's called Dakota raptor, but that might not actually be a real thing. But there are raptors that are that big. They're just not velociraptors. And actually, around the time of the first Jurassic Park movie, they found one of the big ones. They just didn't want to change the name because everyone's familiar with Velociraptor. And these are one of the ones, because they're really popular, a lot of people have latched on to the idea of these being feathered, and especially since they're so closely related to bird. And so art, a lot of the time, you'll see these guys fully decked out in feathers, like I have this picture in the bottom right. But we don't actually... they lived a slightly different time period and slightly different area than we're getting all these ash deposits from. And so we don't actually have any direct evidence of them having feathers on anywhere in their body except on their arms. So this is one of the arm bones. I believe it's a radius. And the top two are the Velociraptor, and the lower two are a modern vulture. And what you can see, if you look at the modern vulture very clearly, there's these little dots evenly spaced going down the arm. And that's actually a spot where the feathers are attaching. The little feather quill attaches right there. And that leaves a discernible mark. And they've actually found a few Velociraptor bones have those. So even though we don't actually have evidence of them having feathers anywhere else on their body, we're fairly certain that they probably had these the pennaceous feathers, the modern flight feathers, down their arms. And so that's a case where...
What's the distinction between a velociraptor and a microraptor?
Microraptor is a lot smaller, and it's mostly going to be skeletal differences. So velociraptor is probably a little more robust, and the microraptor has the feathers on the wings essentially and the legs. Microraptor pretty much has wings.
Are they a subset of another, like all microraptors, a type of velociraptor, or
No,
all they're completely different?
No. Yeah. They're both dromaeosaurids, but they're separate lineages. I think actually, interestingly enough, the phylogenies for some of these are really, we have so many raptors and so many different specimens that there's actually a fair bit of data for them. And I was poking around at the theropod phylogenies, and they plot close to each other. Usually they're pretty closely related, but I've seen some where Velociraptor was more basal or Microraptor was more basal. And that's really one of the things. A lot of these are, it's not a nice timeline where you clearly start with one group having these really, really simple feathers, and then that gets replaced by everything having these intermediate feathers, and then that gets replaced with everything having feathers. You see its feathers late, but you also see more basic feathers late. You see advanced feathers early and intermediate feathers early. So there's a really, really odd mixture, and that really does make this hard to resolve. I'm glad that I'm not into feather dinosaurs right now, because that's it's job security. There's a lot of work to be done on it, but it's really, really complicated relationships that people are dedicating their lives trying to resolve.
No, Archaeopteryx definitely had feathers, right? I mean, that was that like the first flight feathers. As far as flight feathers, I mean, can you tell us the distinction between like flight feathers and what a non-flight feather would be?
Okay, so the flight feathers are the more elongate forms, so like what you see on birds' wings, and they're long, and they have that central shaft, and then you have the branches. You have the branches off, and there's a big deal for them to be true flight feathers. They need to be asymmetrical. Have that same structure, and it can be symmetrical, but if they're all symmetrical, I believe you can't fly with those, and so. It's mostly just the shape and how it's made up. It's got the barbs coming off and then the barbules, and that's what gives you your traditional feather. So what people think of when, like, the first thing you think of when you think of a feather, not like a down, like what would be in a pillow, but the actual feather, like if you plucked one off an eagle's wing, that's a flight feather. And some of these dinosaurs, what they had, so Microraptor had those. They had like very, very similar to the bird's modern flight feathers. But some of these things, like the downy, like very short, almost fuzz that they're covered in, that's a lot more similar to a hair. So it doesn't have all those things branching off in a nice ordered fashion. Sometimes they'll have pieces branching off kind of clearly, but it won't form a nice vein shape. Does that make that a little more clear, Steve?
So all these feathers are, in evolutionary terms, just an evolutionary thing of hair.
No, they're separate from hair. They're actually derived scales.
What, they don't have a hair? They don't have a follicle? I mean, they don't start with some kind of hair shaft that they came from.
They had.
I thought that the feathers were a derivative. So I thought they were a modification of hair. They're not.
No, hair is a separate lineage. Hair arrives in synapsids. So you have like an archosaur synapsid split. Dinosaurs are on the archosaur line, and then mammals come off the synapsid line. And hair doesn't actually evolve until partway down the synapsid line. And feathers are kind of dubious where they actually appeared. There's a large potential time range, and I don't want to spoil anything, but I'll kind of throw a wrench into everyone's interpretation of this near the end. But they're separate, essentially. Okay. Does that help out, Steve?
Yes.
Alrighty. And so this is the one with the really, really hard name. Epidexipteryx. Have fun saying that name.
Sounds good.
And this is a weird little
dinosaur.
You know, that probably Epidexipteryx would have been my second name. I would have called it dinosaur first. I'm with you, Steve. But these are just they're kind of weird. They're once again closely related to birds, and you can see they still have a lot of these raptors. And this is a Scansoriteridae. They have crazy names, man. But that's the group, and probably a lot of adaptations to climbing around in trees. probably they think. And these guys, they don't actually have a lot in the way of these really the more complicated vein-shaped feathers. They're covered in these more simple feathers, and you can see the outline of it on the fossils some there. But what they do have is this, if you look at the tail, they're starting to get their tail shortening. So modern birds, they don't actually have a bony tail. A lot of what you see in the birds' tails today is just the feathers, and they can move those up and down. But on the skeleton, the tail is very, very small, and that's one of the distinctions you see going from dinosaurs with long to birds is getting the short tails. And these guys are starting to shorten their tail a little bit, but they actually have these really, really long. They're hypothesized to be ornamental feathers that stick out in a fan shape, and there's just 4 of them apparently. And so that's another case of you got these animals and they've got different types of feathers, but these actually appeared relatively early, and so you've got ornamental feathers evolving quite early in the fossil record as well. Next slide, please.
I think he had a step
off the job. Oh,
no, Dave, he had a step. I was trying to ask some questions too because he told me he was going to step away for a sec, so I don't know when he's going to.
Gotcha.
Back.
Well, while we wait for him to come back, I hope this is true in a way, and then I hope that it's not true in another way, because not only it'd be cool to kind of discover that in this time period, but in a completely separate case, that makes them more terrifying than they were before.
With the feathers?
Absolutely. Have you seen the artist depictions of a T-Rex with feathers? It looks like a chicken with razor sharp teeth and claws.
Yeah. Well, it's if you think about it too, that'd be really like with scales. There's not a lot of room to actually emote. And if you think about it, think about a Tyrannosaurus Rex staring you down, and then all the feathers on the neck just start to rise up, and just that just looks like it's pissed off. That would be absolutely terrifying.
Okay,
have you guys ever heard of
now,
terror?
So we can.
Awesome.
Yes, I have.
Thank you. Those things are probably equally as terrifying. Yeah, they're aptly named, I think. But not quite terror birds, even though they're similarly built. This is an ornithomime, and these guys you hear, they're a popular kids dinosaur, which you know a lot about. They get called the ostrich dinosaur, and they're probably herbivores or omnivores. This is getting a little bit farther down the theropod family tree, and they found a few specimens of those, and they're actually interesting because we have different growth stages in them. We have a few juveniles and a few adults, and they've noticed a pattern. And so these guys, all the juveniles have a very downy type feather, like what you see on baby birds. And then the adults retain that as well over most of their bodies, but they have these more advanced, more derived vein feathers down their arms. And so this is just another situation. You've got these different types of feathers on the animal, and you have, even without flight, you have these more advanced style feathers that appear to be related to some sort of social display. Next. Go to my notes.
Real quick, what was the name of that dinosaur that had the thing that fanned out?
That was Caudipteryx. C-A-D.
Was that part of his scales, I guess, or were those feathered too? The things that would kind of plume out.
The things that plumed out, those were feathers.
Okay.
So yeah, so they were both the things that actually had the tail fans. They're both probably covered in a down, but then just on the end of the tail, they have those really, really long feathers of a different type.
Cool.
And now we get to probably one of my favorite dinosaurs. This is Eutyrannus, and this is actually an early relative of Pterosaurs. And this is if you look, this is a really large animal. It's about 9 meters long, and they have a really, really good fossil of this thing. And the entire animal appears to be covered in feathers, and it's not the veined, what you think of feathers. It's not the pennaceous feathers. It's more like a filament, so more similar to, it's shaped kind of like the hair, and the entire animal is completely covered in those. And so this is actually the biggest feathered animal that we know of. It's 9 meters is about 30 feet, I think. And so this was really, really big deal when it was found, because you had people throwing around the idea of like, okay, well, is Tyrannosaurus feathered? Because that's the one everyone generally wants to know about. And this is an early relative of it, and this is big. Before this, there had been a lot of talk that maybe some of these smaller animals were feathered, and then as they got big, they lost their feathers. And this kind of at least pushed in the direction that you can still be a large size and retain feathers, that it is indeed possible. It's not thermally going to kill you per se. And if you'll go to the next slide, please. The big question, obviously transitioning from that, is what does that mean for tyrannosaurs? And unfortunately for the big tyrannosaurs, we don't have a lot of those in the nice volcanic deposits. They tend to be in bone beds that you think like the Badlands out in Montana, and you don't have great preservation, and things are a little more beat up looking. And so this is a diagram kind of synthesizing some of the areas that we have integument on Tyrannosaurus, or in Tyrannosaurus rex. You've got it a lot on the head. We've got a couple on the back and neck, and then even on the tail. And we don't have a feather. The skin impressions from these areas, and all just scaled. And so even though that Tyrannus is an ancestor of Tyrannosaurus rex, it predates it by like 50 million years of time before you get from Tyrannus to Tyrannosaurus rex. And so it looks like Tyrannosaurus might not actually have had feathers. But I think something important to kind of take away from this is what this means is that the adult didn't have feathers in those areas. There is still some talk that maybe along parts of the back where we don't have the skin impressions, or on the upper part of the tail, that they might have still had feathers, or along the very tops of the legs they had them. But this basically what this means is that they certainly had scales. They might not have had feathers. And unfortunately, that's all you really can say. But it certainly does look like they probably weren't feathered. They might actually have gotten too big, or just might not have needed them anymore. It might have warmed up, and they didn't need the feathers for insulation anymore. Next slide, please. And this might help out with what Steve was asking me earlier. These are some of the different stages of feather design to give you guys an idea of what I'm talking about when I'm naming off these different feathers. So the first one is the very first one on the left. That's a simple filamentous feather. And so it really does kind of look like a hair where it connects down, it comes in, it's just this central shaft by itself. And then you get the stage 2, and this isn't like I said, this isn't, unfortunately, it's neat. I've seen it referred to a lot of different ways. Even within the literature, I found downy feathers and filamentous used interchangeably sometimes. Sorry. And but that's what stage 2 is this more that starts to branch out into multiple threads. And then you get to stage 3, which produces the veined feathers. And they've got a 3A and a 3B that you see in more modern birds, where you have regular branching of that central shaft, and then branches off of those beyond. And it's really kind of what we're looking at when these different feathers. And like I said, there is not a clear evolutionary relationship, because some of these may have evolved independently a couple times, it looks like. But that's just to give you a visualization.
That's where I thought the hair came from, because I've seen things like this before, and I thought that was like a hair follicle. And actually, there's there's multiple trees of this. This is like broken down very, very, very simply. Because there's actually, like you said, there's different evolutionary pathways, and then bifurcation, and then bifurcation and the bifurcation going on.
Yeah, there has to be, because these things are all over the place temporally, and a lot of them have like some and not others, and it's a jumbled mess to actually try to resolve this. And we're really at the mercy of what the fossil record gives us to work with. And if we just get that one specimen that has the right kind to be able to tell us what we need. Next, please. And so everything that I've shown up to this point has been pretty closely related to birds. Even Tyrannosaurus grew into a clade called Coelosauridae, and that's all really, really closely related to birds. And so if we go way down on a tree and get to a much more form that you're on, this is Concavinator, which is one of my favorite names. And it's just a very, very odd looking earlier theropod. It's got a weird crest that's only on the back, and sometimes you see it's almost U-shaped where it'll come up in front of the where that crest, another one will come up right in front of it. But these guys, once again, we don't have very much for them, but what we do have is quill knobs. And because the bones are a little bit bigger, you can see better than the Velociraptor figure, where you have these knobs. So even very far down in the pod tree, you've already got evidence of having these feathers on the animal. Next, please. And so, essentially, we're really, really close on the lineage now, and for sauropods, there is no evidence of being feathered whatsoever. We don't have a single sauropod where we have anything. I think there's a couple, like they tend to get osteoderms, so where you get actual bone covered in keratin that grows into hard plates. Some of them get those, but we have a few scale impressions from them, but we don't have any evidence of feathers in those. We do, however, have interesting stuff from the Ornithischia group. Next slide. And so this is Psittacosaurus, and you'll immediately notice it's got this very, very weird set of bristles, almost like a porcupine, that run down the back of the tail. And so this is way more closely related to something like a Triceratops than it is birds, or probably even to the theropod dinosaurs. And these bristle-like structures, and they seem to be very to those the simple filamentous feathers that some of the theropod dinosaurs have. It's just almost like they've derived them and they've made them bigger and thicker, and they're covering part of their bodies with them. Next slide. And probably the most important paleontological find for dinosaurs of the last 20 years is Culindrodromeus. And the first thing I'd like to point out, I used this picture to kind of show you like the different areas. This isn't the fossil, so the actual fossil is on a slab. I don't want people to misinterpret and think they just these rocks and they're like, oh, these are all, so they're all the same animal in made era. Those are just this display. They just made different casts and copies of different pieces of the slab and then artistically put them up there to show you. So this is like the actual is all the animal together in one spot. But this is actually far up into Ornithischia, a fairies, and this is Culindrodromeus, and it's got these downy intermediate level style filamentous feathers going on in it, and it's also got scales. So the picture on the specimen was really, really not photogenic. And so we know it had feathers on down its head, down the back, over to the body, and probably over part of the tail. But we have a really, really weird set of almost spiked looking scales that are associated with the tail that look like they might have actually slid off after decomposition started happening before the animal buried. Next slide, please. And so another addition to show you, this is Tian Yulong. It's another Chinese find, and it also had these filamentous, bristly kind of feathers going on covered. They found them only on the back, so this rendering has them all over the animal. But I think it's important. The only part where we actually have the fossils with them, to my knowledge, is along the back. So they found a place on the neck, on the back, and on the tail, and the tallest on the tail. Very, very similar to the Nikosaurus that I showed. So the interesting thing that we have going on here then is we have theropods with feathers, and we have ornithischia feathers. Next slide, please. Right there. Thank you. And you'll see they're on the separate lineages. And so that kind of raises the question, did feathers evolve at the base of the dinosaur family tree and then sauropods lost them, so we don't have evidence of them happening? Or did it evolve twice? You know, did it evolve with Ornithischia and theropods separately, or a common trait? And that's like one of the questions they're trying to answer now. And this is the traditional dinosaur family tree right here. This is what for since dinosaurs were described and first kind of put into motion, they've been separated into Saurischia ornith split. But recently a paper has come out. Next slide, please. Barron et al. Published a paper where he actually shook up the dinosaur family tree. And so he took a really, really large data set. He spent a lot of time looking at a lot of the early dinosaur forms of each group. And he took it was absurd. There was like 300 something characters that he coded for. And there was like 70 different dinosaurs that he did it for. And so he had to code for a ton of characters, but he had a very, very large and robust data set. And he actually recovered this. And the main thing is this diagram and has Herrerasauridae on that. Don't worry about that too much. That's just, they're a weird group. They're kind of like theropods. And when I was a kid, they were theropods. And then when I was a teenager, they weren't. And when I got back into college, they were. And then last year, I could have swore they weren't. So they get switched around a lot. But the important thing to note here is in this relationship or family tree that he's recovered, Ornithischia is actually more related to to theropods than either of those groups are to sauropods. So they come out sister taxa. And so this is really interesting because this could actually mean parsimoniously, you would only require one evolution of feathers. You wouldn't have this weird problem where they evolved twice and look really, really similar to each other. And so beyond just finding the feathers on the animal, I think there are other ways to kind of tell what might be going on. And this is by no means currently accepted yet. There was a lot of resistance to this when this paper was first published, and there's still it came out in 2017, and so people are slowly kind of working their way through it and trying to recreate results. But I'm personally, because the data set's really, really robust, and I think that the methods were solid, I think this is probably going to end up being the leading hypothesis. Next slide, please. And so even though that helped tidy the problem of the different featherings, I guess, I'm going to throw a wrench in that now. And so this shows farther out past dinosaurs into a cladogram. And so on the right, you have the dinosaur groups, and you can see the Ornithischian Saurischia split. And just below those, you have pterosaurs. And so those are the closest relatives to dinosaurs that aren't dinosaurs. Next slide, please. And so I would just like to point out there's a lot of diversity in pterosaurs, and they are not dinosaurs. So whenever people start talking about flying dinosaurs, Microraptor is a flying dinosaur. Archaeopteryx is a flying dinosaur. The blue jay is a flying dinosaur. A pterodactyl or a pteranodon or any of these weird crested forms, those aren't dinosaurs. But these, even though they aren't dinosaurs, crazy, right? I know the marine reptiles aren't dinosaurs either. Plesiosaurs aren't dinosaurs. I hate to ruin your childhood, but that's just how it is.
Stop it now. I've got
next slide, please. And so to kind of throw a wrench in this, they found pterosaurs that have weird feather-like integument structures. So these resemble kind of like the stage 1 or stage 2 feathers, where they're still very, very filamentous. And so this is a Gehalopterus. It's a weird toad-looking thing, honestly. Ugh. And it's a small pterosaur. And it's an early pterosaur, and it has these feather-like structures that are covering it. Next slide, please. And you can see before the slide changes, on the outline of the fossil, you can clearly see where the down is, and they found a few of those specimens. And so we have pterosaurs that are feathered. Yeah, if you look around on both of the specimens, you can see. So we have pterosaurs that are feathered. I'm sorry. Yeah, the pterosaurs that are feathered and the dinosaurs. And so it really is right now, unfortunately, there's very, very little literature available on the pterosaur. They're called pycnofibers in them. They went ahead and named them something separate because the first people who described them thought they were going to be separate. And but since then, they found a lot more of the intermediate stage feathers. And because they tend to be so tightly packed in the pterosaurs, I believe, there's not been many structural studies actually done on them. So no one's really looked at that yet. I'm sure people are working on it. But so you just have this really, really weird situation where you have all these different groups that have feathers, and they're showing up, and they're not sure where they originated. They can't really say for sure. The traditional interpretation, or I guess the leading interpretation right now, appears to be that pterosaurs and dinosaurs evolved feathers separately. And so that's... Was that Kyle?
I just said, whoa, that's pretty cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, which honestly, that's not very parsimonious, and that would be kind of odd if they did that. I wouldn't be surprised at all. Right now I'm on the fence of probably separate evolutions, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if we found something basal to both pterosaurs and dinosaurs that had feathers on it. That wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. That would make a lot of sense. But so I've kind of laid out like all these different dinosaurs that have feathers, and like a bunch of different purposes that they're serving. And I've got this slide just kind of show a variety of different things that feathers might do, because if I hope one thing has been clear, it's that feathers certainly predate flight. So the first feathers were not used to fly. An animal just didn't have feathers and start flying one day. That's not how evolution works. And there's a lot of different hypotheses going around for how feathers actually arose. And one of the biggest things, and this is one of the reasons I like this topic so much in particular, is because it has a lot of implications for dinosaur ecology as a whole. And so one of the leading hypotheses is that they actually evolved feathers in relation to their warm-bloodedness. So a lot of the time people think of dinosaurs and they assume they're reptiles, so they're cold-blooded. But if you look at birds, birds are warm-blooded, like mammals are. And a lot of these dinosaurs, especially the theropods, they have to be active, quick-moving hunters. The raptors certainly. And there's a very, very real case for most theropods being that very, very active predatory lifestyle. And having feathers would be really, really advantageous in that situation, because the second when you become endotherm, you start making a lot of heat, but that heat's very expensive to make. And you want to try to conserve as much of it as you can. And so if you had feathers, that's going to act exactly like a mammal fur does. It's going to insulate you and keep you warm. That's how penguins can survive in the freezing temperatures, is because their feathers help keep them warm. The only problem with that is, and that makes a lot of sense, and that almost certainly helped contribute to why so many of these different dinosaurs have these feathers. But the thing is, they're not going to evolve. You're not just going to get randomly a creature that has one mutation and it's all of a sudden covered in these feathers, if that makes sense. And so it probably originated from a different source. And so there is a paper that has proposed what it might be is that they started off almost like whiskers. So modern birds have a type of feather. It's called a facial bristle, and you can see them best on the bottom left bird there, the emu, where it's just like a sharp, almost like a hair. This probably are those the filamentous feathers that you're seeing in some of these early dinosaurs, and
like Steve's facial bristles.
Exactly, but bushier and more aggressive. And my very, very poorly kept facial bristles.
This works great for thermoregulation as well. I mean, and then my hair, I'm telling you, when it gets cold, it warms you up. It works.
Steve's gonna be way more fit when it gets cold. We're done, Kyle. He's gonna outdo us.
I'm gonna be suited I'm gonna be suited. My genes will be passed on because I'm able to acclimate to the environment.
Oh,
I wouldn't adapt to the environment. Individuals don't adapt. Populations adapt, but we can acclimate.
Whitewash genes.
You mean you wouldn't just spontaneously develop more fur and need to have fur and stay warm?
The way I understood it is, if you jump off a cliff, you spontaneously develop wings according to evolution, right?
Duh.
Lamarckism, exactly. If you want wings hard enough and you flap hard enough, the feathers will evolve.
There you go. See, it's all evolution's mind over matter.
Absolutely.
We got it. The very first dinosaur that had feathers was the first one that jumped off a cliff. The end. Case closed.
Leap and the net will appear.
He was the leader of the pack. Now, you said that these were what temperature? I thought were they not mesotherms or were they endotherms?
Because I thought
there's
still a lot. There's still a lot of debate, and they're not 100% sure. There's another term too for the sauropods called gigantothermy that gets thrown around just because they're so big that would essentially, they can keep the heat in well enough to almost be warm-blooded. But honestly, there's not a strong consensus right now. There's every year at SVP, there's a few more talks about it and people are throwing down. Most of what I've heard recently is endothermy, but I've heard mesotherms thrown around too. I'm kind of on the fence, and this is not my area of expertise. I'm a depositional environment and maybe talk about a little bit of the animal ecology kind of guy. But there's people who are putting out some very, very interesting work into it. But I believe that the dominant is endothermy right now. But if you have these facial bristles, that would be a relatively simple thing. And in modern birds, they have a lot of mechanoreceptors, so they're probably related to being able to like I touch basically and sense things. And the idea is that if they had those, maybe those are easier to modify. They give you sort of an immediate advantage to having those, and that would give a reason for them to actually benefit and propagate through population. And then because they're on the face, and the face has a lot of surface area, and it radiates a lot of heat, if you evolve them on your face first, you're getting an immediate benefit of being able to keep heat in. And the face is also, if you have any social behaviors, face is an area that animals are going to look at on each other. And that's one of the hypotheses that they put forward. And from there, the feathers started to cover the animals and evolve further. And that's actually very, very similar to the leading hypothesis for mammals, how their fur may have started is in the whiskers. They call them vibrissae in mammals. And they have a similar explanation, which actually would have been probably around the same time of those evolving and then propagating in what became mammal hair. And so that's you can tell a lot. Was that?
Is it sweet?
Yeah, you can. That's why I think this topic is so cool, because it has a lot of implications for how these animals may have actually acted when they were alive, and kind of what the evolutionary pressures on them may have actually been. Next slide, please. And so kind of an example to give you, I guess, one last dinosaur that I think is really, really neat. This is an oviraptor. This one in particular is City Patty. And oviraptor means egg thief. And so I'm sure everybody who's encountered one of these dinosaurs has seen a picture of it, like running off with some other dinosaur's egg and eating it. They did that in the Disney movie Dinosaur. And what happened is when they discovered this dinosaur, they found it right next to a fossilized nest. And so, it's vaguely raptor-like, and it's in the same general group as a lot of these raptors are. And so they assumed that it was the predator coming to steal the eggs. And they later actually found them fossilized on top of their eggs. And so this is one of those where you can see you've got the animal. It's actually sitting in a brooding position on top of the nest. And so we know they have the feathers for these dinosaurs on their arms. We find them. And so they're probably holding their feathers over the nest to help keep them warm. And they've also, in some of these animals, there's evidence that these feathers on the arms may be related to some sort of social cues, and then as well with the tail. So this is an animal that, it's getting the benefit of being warm-blooded. It's getting the benefit of being able to brood and to keep its eggs warm, and it's getting social benefits out of this. And so even though you don't necessarily see it a lot in the depictions, these feathers are really, really important for how these animals were living and spending their days, and they're, I think, really large part of what made them probably what they are, even if we can't always observe that. Next slide, please. And so I hope that I've laid out a good case for you that, a lot of these dinosaurs did have feathers, and it probably goes back further than people have thought about it. But I think the important thing to keep in mind is for all of these dinosaurs that we have feathers for, we have others with scales. So it's like the sauropods are, even under the new phylogeny, they're still dinosaurs. And we don't have any feathers in them. The Tyrannosaurus, for example, we don't have any evidence of feathers. Even a lot of the ornithischians, we have scale imprints, and we don't have a lot of evidence of having all these feathers on them. And so I don't want people to get carried away, like when I'm throwing down with the feathers, if you will, that I think a lot of them probably had substantial feathering, but there was definitely, scales were definitely important to these animals too. It wasn't an abrupt shift to, all right, we don't need scales anymore, and then feathers just took over. You had a lot of back and forth. Different animals had different needs. The feathers are probably more expensive to maintain. They get parasites really bad. Modern birds have huge problems with parasites. One of my advisors where I did my undergrad, he always kind of said he doesn't understand why Jurassic Park just doesn't use the parasite excuse and say, yeah, we made them with feathers and they had parasites, so we got rid of them genetically. And it's you have all those, you know, competing pressures as to why these animals might be turning towards scales or turning to feathers. And I just think even with all these feathered forms, I think it's important to not get too carried away and not put massive amounts of feathers on everything. Not everything needs to be a giant chicken with razor sharp teeth, essentially. So, next slide, yeah. So I believe that's.
Before you get to your next part, since
Yes,
I think you're nearing towards the end, I want to put out there in the live chat whether or not you think that the dinosaurs, after hearing this, had feathers or not. Let's see how many people either think they did or maybe changed their mind. So if you do, put hashtag feathers in the live chat if you think so, because I think you've laid out a pretty convincing case, in my opinion, anyway.
Thank you.
But we'll see what the live chat says. Okay, go ahead.
Awesome. But yeah, that was actually I'm pretty sure. And even this bottom picture here, the bottom middle, that's the Culindrodromeus, the feathered little ornithischian guy that was prancing around in the swamp in the picture. Those weird spike scales that I was talking about, that's on the bottom part of that picture. So even those who had really, really specialized feathers already, that intermediate stage, they were also doing stuff with their scales and kind of specializing them into these weird spiked shapes simultaneously. And so next slide. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to convey with everything.
So everybody in the live chat said no feathers. They said you're full of crap. There's no such thing as dinosaurs with feathers, and the Earth is 6,000 years old. And they also said that there's a pterodactyl they shot down during the Civil War that they have evidence of.
Oh man, yeah. But did you know that John chemist scientist John Morrison is going to catch one for us? He said it himself.
Hey, you know what? I read they shot down a pterodactyl.
Chat, you caught me. I'm actually live chat. You caught me. I'm actually the second coming of Kent Hovind.
Oh,
he's a Kent Hovind.
Clear him off.
I'm just bullshitting the world.
I haven't seen anybody say anything but feathers. One person wants jelly juice. That wasn't the vote.
Everybody's saying feathers. Hashtag feathers.
Awesome.
Hashtag feathers.
I think it's pretty well established. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but Alan Fiducia is like the only bandit left out there, isn't he? For the most part, I mean, there's very few bandits that I'm aware of except for him.
He even accepts that, from what I can tell, he even accepts that dinosaurs were feathered. He just thinks that birds. I think, and I don't take me 100% on this because I don't know him personally and I haven't looked super in depth into his arguments. But yeah, he's the last major holdout where he doesn't think that birds came from dinosaurs. But there's an asterisk to that. He's arguing for them in a lower place. It's I think.
So it's a lot more nuanced with him. He's not like
I've heard and I've read places. I've read places where he thinks that they break off before dinosaurs and that they're just super convergent to theropods. But he's from what I know, he's the only one, and he might be a good person to try to get on the show sometime. Because he can tell you his position better than I can. But from what I understand, it's not because he knows a lot about birds. He's very knowledgeable on them, and I actually used one of his publications. He published on, I think, some of the feathers on some of these things. So I've read different things. I've read that he's got them completely outside of Dinosauria, and then I read something earlier today that said he might just have them not as far derived in Dinosauria. They might be an earlier offshoot. I believe it's the former rather than the latter. But there's next to no support. There's like no support for that. No one buys that. If you go to the Society of Vertebrate Paleontology meeting, if he's there, there'll be one person there who thinks that dinosaurs aren't, or that birds aren't dinosaurs.
You always gotta have one out there, right?
Yeah, there's always one.
Well, I think your presentation was fabulous. The slides were well done.
Mhm.
I love the
Thank you.
the graphics in the slides. And now we will open it up to a couple questions. I know Steve's got some super chats we can read off real quick while you guys get some questions if you have any, and then we will.
Yeah, I'll answer
ask them
pretty much anything paleo if anyone wants to know, even if it's not related to the feathers. Some fair game. I love answering questions.
All right. Wellington Smith, $5. WTF? Brontosaurus was real. Ramit. I made fun of 1975 Land of the Lost my whole life. I grew up with Land of the Lost, and sleeve stacks are cool. Do you guys ever watch the original?
Do you remember
I haven't seen the original?
The Land Before Time?
Oh yeah, sure. That was with what was her name? Was that Raquel Welch?
It was a cartoon.
Oh no! What was it? What was it? It was like a million years BC.
Yeah,
what was Raquel Welch in? She was like dressed in like leather. Way before your time.
Yeah.
I think it was like a million years BC or something like that. The live chat will know. They were old like me.
Kyle, thank you for being lost.
You're welcome.
0132 $10. Did T-Rex quack or roar? What about raptors? Would a Dionynus probably taste like more like chicken or raccoon?
Both of these have actually been the topic of conversation with my buddies in undergrad more than I can express. We frequently talked about what the dinosaurs probably taste like. I think probably, I think for like the sauropods and stuff, probably more like beef. So I think it's more related to their niche, because I think it's going to be more related to what they're eating and what they're doing. But raptors probably taste a lot like turkey or chicken.
Let me ask.
I'd be shocked if they didn't.
Let's say we had one bite-sized morsel of meat from a T-Rex. That's all it is. For whatever reason, that's all we had was a little
T-Rex,
little steak of T-Rex. How much do you think that would be worth to have somebody try it? How much do you think they would bid on that?
I don't think Trump could buy it.
It would be an ungodly amount of money to have for.
Dude, I think that would be
worth the only one that knows what it ever tastes like. You'd be the only human ever to know what T-Rex tastes like.
It tastes like beef because ostrich tastes like beef.
Except you're young. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was going to say, unless you're a young Earth creationist, then they hunted them to extinction.
Sure.
What the hell's wrong with these people? I swear to it sounds funny.
All I'm saying is,
believe this. They literally believe this.
All I'm saying is, I'm not afraid to fight somebody, but you couldn't pay me to fight most of these dinosaurs. Like even the hadrosaurs. I wish I'd have included the scale. They're huge. They're bigger than elephants. And I mean, and they're the docile ones too. Like relatively, like they're considered the nice, friendly dinosaurs, the hadrosaurs, and they're freaking huge. And then it's just like the raptors are all like, dude, that's terrifying. If they did pack hunt, like the Utah raptors are fairly good size. They're like halfway to being T-Rex sized. So like, if you have a pack of those, they're hunting us to extinction, not the other way around. I assure you of that. That we couldn't have made sticks big enough. We'd still be in caves. We'd be in caves with sticks like Poke the Scary Monster, as Joe Rogan says. So, and as for the roaring versus quacking, that's actually that's a question that's actually come up a little more recently. I don't think there's actually any evidence that T-Rex could have roared. There's a documentary series called Dinosaur Revolution. And in it, they have a really the T-Rex that they have in it. It's got this really, really weird. It's halfway in between a roar and like a squawk. And honestly, it's kind of unnerving. It's really, really cool. Kyle, I'm gonna send you. You have to watch it. It's got little feathers on its arms, and it rears up and flaps them like that, and does the squawk. It's great.
No, next thing you know, you're gonna be telling me that the T-Rex didn't like stomp when it walked; it pranced.
If T-Rex didn't roar, my entire childhood is a lie. Thank you very much. I don't want this big old thing.
Exactly.
No, it roared, man.
When it runs.
I've seen the movies.
Did you see it dancing about?
It danced.
They skip through the fields of dandelions, making be very careful to not hurt the flowers.
Now how this guy support his neck by drinking the water? That's what I don't get. He would have died.
Oh, that's true.
No neck support. Yeah. Or Birdie.
Did you hear about that, Nick?
I watched that. That was painful.
Okay. Yep.
That was.
We get a whole different level of stupid on this show, Joe.
I'm gonna go ahead and ruin it in case he watches it. But I was gonna find Trevor if he's at SVP this year, and I was just gonna walk up to him and ask him. I was gonna be like, "Hey, how did dinosaurs exist if brontosauruses couldn't drink?" And I was gonna try to say it as seriously as possible and let him just be really confused. Someone just randomly walks up to him and says that at the conference.
That's awesome. That'd be funny. If you do that, please get it on camera and send it to us.
I'll record it. I'll get my phone out.
All right, Steve.
I imagine the face he'll make. You could put that on the nun. It'll just be like a really confused look of disgust.
I should dress the nun with some of our former guests. That'd be funny. Kent Hoven's next.
That'd be cool.
There's no more super chats, but Zero in live chat said the roar is a lie. Yeah, the roar is a lie, just like the cake is a lie.
The roar is a lie.
I was disappointed to find out that the cake was a lie. Now I'm finding out that the roar is a lie. It's like everything in my life just is a lie. That might be in a simulation too. I mean, we're gonna be awfully depressed after doing this show.
Steve, you don't need facts. You just need faith.
Amen.
Yeah. That was the moral of the story at the beginning.
I'm gonna will myself just by faith alone to lose 5 pounds. We'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
You're not gonna lose 5 pounds.
I'm actually down a little bit. I'm actually
just using faith. With walking, you will, but just with the faith, you won't. No. And I'll tell you, Nick, I think we peaked tonight at like 250 watching. I haven't seen anybody say anything about not having feathers. So I think you had a pretty convincing presentation, I think.
Yep. I had it easy. I feel like most of them probably knew already, but never hurts to explain why.
Yeah, you'd be surprised though. There was a couple of people in on Twitter that had messaged me asking if they knew some dinosaurs had feathers, but not to the extent that I think you laid out tonight. You know, there's obvious candidates, but I think you did a pretty good job of explaining why. So excellent job, sir.
Thank you. If nothing else, I just hope that some people learn some cool stuff about some dinosaurs.
Absolutely.
Because I think whenever,
go ahead.
I was gonna say real quick, as scientists, and because I'm working my way there, I think any chance you get to kind of like express to people what you're doing and why it's cool and why it's interesting, I think that's really, really, really important. And so, like I said, thank you guys so much for letting me come on here and do this, because this is awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
And we hope you'll come back.
We love when people come.
You do other areas,
absolutely.
Right?
Oh, absolutely. No, we can definitely talk about that.
What else would you like? What else other kind of areas interest you the most?
I mean, most things biology that are like ecology based. I'm not as much on the cellular. It fascinates me, but it's not my area of expertise. Paleo stuff, geology, because I'm actually my undergrad was geology, so I am trained as a geologist, and I'm incorporating a lot of bio stuff into what I do. And then just I don't know, I'd have to think about other random stuff. One day I'm gonna debate Hovind. One day. But one day
we can set that up actually.
I will do it. Not only will I debate him, but I will crush him, because I've seen all, and you can mark my words now, I make the prediction, he doesn't have anything he can say that I don't have a response to. I've watched so many. This is what I did my undergrad career. Like the last 2 years, I've just been on YouTube listening to videos and stuff whenever I'm working on something. And so I've seen all of his terrible debates, and I've just heard the same things over and over and over again. And I think I know how to mess with him. So I'd probably be down for that at some point.
I've engaged with him quite a few times. Yeah.
I'm writing that down.
I don't think he'll change his mind, and it doesn't matter how hard he gets beat. He'll never admit it. He'll never change his mind.
No.
I would totally like, if you guys wanted me to debate people, I'd debate them.
I've written down right now, so I'm gonna make that make that happen. I would love to see that. What were you gonna say, Dave?
I was gonna say I speed read his dissertation in 15 minutes.
I am so sorry.
And it's
hi, my name is Ken Hovind.
Two things: the fact that I could speed read a dissertation and that I could do it in 15 minutes was very shocking.
Yep.
And not only understand what there was to understand, it was bizarre. To me, it read like a 5th grade book report of some kind.
A 5th grade.
Well, because a 5-year-old does
report.
it, Steve. Remember?
I don't think you're giving 5th graders enough.
Yeah, I mean, no, it was, the Fleischmann index was, I think it was at a 5th or 6th grade level when they run it through their index. It basically, he's arguing Satan didn't exist. He's like, oh, my name is Ken Hovind, and I've been teaching high school for 15 years. Well, you know what? He's never taught high school for 15 years. I even asked him that question. I said, Ken, once and for all, do you have any teaching credentials? Have you ever taught a course that was ever credentialed or you can get credit for? He's like, no. Then why are you saying you taught high school? That's like saying, because I tutored my daughter in math, I'm a math teacher. That's how dishonest he is.
That makes sense,
Yeah,
though. Lysandrine just sent a thing in that said, here's to trying to follow science Ohio and Percocet. Well, hopefully, whatever ails you, that you get better. And then on Sunday is the show that he actually brought to our attention about the possum poisoning problem in New Zealand. So that will be Sunday. Looking forward to that. So I hope you get to feel feeling better, whatever it is that is troubling you, sir. Nick, I was gonna say,
Mm-hmm.
I have a dumb question. This is probably a stupid question, but it's
no stupid questions.
I've never.
There are no
stupid questions.
There really
are. Yes, there are. There are absolutely stupid questions.
Not from
this
you.
Is one of them.
Not from.
Just because I'm sure it has no connection, but I'm just curious because Triceratops have what looks like a beak on the front of their face.
They do,
and they may have been feathered. Is there any relation there?
The beak is a pretty common thing that you get in a lot of archosaurs and a lot of reptiles. It's just it's a great design and it works, and so it tends to get evolved a lot. So there could be a connection there. Probably because I only know of one mammal with a beak, and that I can think of. It's a platypus, and that's not really a beak. So it probably is this lineage with the dinosaurs and birds and some of the reptiles. That probably is just the lineage that gets beaks. I'm probably forgetting a really, really obvious one, and someone in the live chat's gonna know. But the interesting thing about them is if you look at their teeth, some of their teeth look kind of sharp. It's kind of freaky. Like they almost look like they could be like if you're just like sharp teeth means carnivore, it almost looks like they could eat meat. And that's actually an idea that gets thrown around a lot because of the beak, that they might have been I don't know if that actually has any merit to it, but that the Triceratopsians might be like bullying other animals away from kills and supplementing their diet with the meat. So you'd be onto something, Kyle. Not a stupid question.
Hey, look at that. Look at that. Well, that's a good note to end on then. But yeah, we appreciate you coming through, and octopuses have beaks. Yes, they do. I remember having to dissect one in class. Oh,
too.
And then we ate calamari afterwards. Like, what a what a brutal thing. We had to dissect them, and then they cut them up and made calamari out of it, which the calamari was really good, I must say. But still, nobody wants to eat that after dissecting one.
I like calamari.
Yeah, not a seafood person, so.
So, Nick, go ahead and let everybody know where they can, if they want to know more, if they can follow you on social media or wherever you are, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I don't have much of a social media. I have a Facebook. It's just Nikolas Brand. If you want to send me a friend request, do so. Maybe shoot a message and be like, "Hey, I saw you on the NonSequitur show." Other than that, I'm not actually really on anything. I will have a YouTube channel hopefully soon, and it's just gonna be Nikolas Brand videos until I find a better name than that. But I'm on Discord too, Nikolas Brand, and my you can email me at nicholasbrandvideos@gmail.com if you have any questions. I love to get questions from people. If you can't find something
You
on
gotta
the
do a
internet,
play
I can
on
try and
words,
answer
Nick.
myself.
You gotta do a play on words with your last name being Brand. You gotta do
I'll
something
figure
like
something
Dino
out.
Brand or something like that. That'd be great.
Oh, I'll get one. It'll come to me eventually.
Awesome. All right, Steve. Anything that you want to? Yes, I know calamari is squid. By the way.
Yeah, I love calamari. I do love calamari. Yeah, octopus is taco. But anyways, somebody wants to be like a neutral third party to kind of resolve this thing with me and Andrew, and they want me to postpone this thing on Sunday. And to them, I appreciate that you're trying for that. Ain't no goddamn way I'm postponing this. He's going down on Sunday, and he's going down hard. The people that want to distance themselves from him, I would recommend doing it now. If you want to take the moral high ground and say, look, I know, Andrew, you lied. There's no question about it. Steve, you have overwhelming evidence. Do that now, because it's going to be a scorched earth policy. So I'm giving my friends fair warning, because I mean, there's a lot of good Christians out there and a lot of good people that I have a lot of respect for. So if they want to take the high ground now, do it.
Steve's crazy ex-girlfriend status now.
Yeah, I'm crazy ex-girlfriend status.
I'm like my roommate's crazy ex
everything he loves. Yeah.
Oh yes,
salt the earth
of
everything
really
he loves.
Yeah, I'm gonna salt it.
He's doing that now.
Oh yeah. No, I'm not, and I'm not even running. I mean, he's, by the way, Kyle's only seen a fraction of what I have, and he's already determined that's enough to devastate
just because
him.
he doesn't interest me that. He just until today he doesn't interest me that much. Like he runs something called the Council of Google Plus. There's a false sense of making himself up to be something that he's not, and just Sunday hit it and go and like move on. Like he doesn't. It's not worth getting.
But I told you he was a bigot, right? Oh, I don't get upset. I find it entertaining. But he's a bigot.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a homophobic bigot.
But Nick, somebody said to call yourself Dr. Dino Jr.
Dino
That would actually be funny. That would actually be funny. And thank you.
That'll really help build the debate.
Oren,
one more super chat.
But evolution is just a theory, Steve. And on that, we will see you tomorrow at. One second. Hold that for Steve. Hold that for Sunday, because it's part of the brilliant part of that plan. So don't give that away yet. I know what you're getting ready to say. But don't give that away yet.
All right, that's fair enough. No, that's cool.
Wait for Sunday. We'll see you tomorrow. We will be up and early tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern with Frustrated Atheist and S.J. Thomason, who will be debating communism and atheism. So that's going to be interesting.
It's going to be truly in the morning. I'm going to be there, so you be there.
Comrades and comradettes, we will see you with your furry hats and your sickle and hammer tomorrow at 11 a.m. Vodka time.
Non sequitur. Your facts are uncoordinated.